hold on. Ready? Does anyone know Valerie?
David does.
That sounded pretty good.
You like it?
Yeah, maybe it's because I didn't have Rob screaming in my other ear.
Okay, yes, this is our re-recording because I forgot to push the record button. So we're having to re-record all the wonderful conversation that we had for episode 45 of IoT Coffee Talk. Welcome. And we have Stephanie and David and me. And today we're going to talk about IoT in oil and gas, I guess, right?
That's what we were, yeah, that's what we were flowing.
This is going to be a short one simply because I forgot to press the record button. All this wonderful conversation that we had beforehand didn't get recorded. So, and we're out of the house. We're not doing Clubhouse this week. Thank God. Thank God.
That's okay.
Sorry about that, guys.
Well, I guess the community will get the condensed version. So, I think one of the points that we were talking is that, folks think energy utilities, oil and gas, and immediately their mind wanders to the really big outfits, but not so much to the field services companies, those outfits that are absolutely, the heartbeat of the big industries, right? But they are your 10, 12, 50 manpower and women power outfits. And the discussion was around, you have these folks who are experts in what they do and how they service oil and gas companies and deliver maintenance and installations, etc. These folks are also asset heavy, especially the ones that have to do, again, installs and maintenance. And during our conversation, we brought up the fact that as a community, because they're not considered large players, they may be either underserved from an IoT perspective, or there's very little awareness. And some of the things could be, one, there isn't a IoT provider that decided to solve a very specific issue. For example, I'll say asset management, which to us could mean many things, but in this case, tools, parts, equipment that a field services operator needs to have on hand to support a client that they have a contract with. That's, in this case, what we're calling assets. And while we have seen both on the enterprise side and maybe, medium-sized businesses, many asset management solutions that do leverage IoT and sensors and tags and whatnot, we were discussing how this community might be underserved. Some of the issues that we talked and Stephanie brought this up, is there a perception that these things will be expensive? Therefore, don't talk to me about it. Is there not a cultural issue, but is there an organizational issue where if this outfit doesn't have an IT department, they might not be as open to having a technology discussion? And we were going down the path so how do you educate them? Do you go through a distributor? Do you go through the majors? And so anyway, I don't know. That was like the recap of this, let's solve it for oil and gas. So I'll give it back to Stephanie for some smart commentary, unlike mine.
Well, I'd say too, I would add is the operational assets, right? The pipeline. And, I think a lot of those in the industry, they think about the industry upstream, downstream, midstream. And then you have the ecosystem is pretty wide when it comes to the suppliers and the vendors that are serving this sector. But the field services piece is what we were kind of digging into, because there's a lot of smaller players in that space, but, they are the heartbeat from an operational perspective. And they are also the relationship that many of these large energy companies depend on for their, what Leonard said earlier was it's all about production and flow. And anything that disrupts that is massive amounts of money, and that's their focus and that's how they're measured in the industry. That's how they're measured when it comes to regulatory and compliance. But the whole issue is how do we connect with these possibly under-resourced or underserved? That's a big term I think a lot of folks are using as well. Industry providers, not industry providers, but industry players in the oil and gas energy industry that could highly benefit from IoT, but they're not necessarily the ones that are going to go out there and have these conversations with large companies. And are they having these conversations with more so? Would it benefit by having those conversations through their traditional suppliers and vendors that they already operate under, already have the relationship with? And because money is a factor. But the other thing I was thinking of, David, is that maybe they don't have an IT person, but it's all about operations. So they're going to have operational and project and program managers that are in charge of anything and everything that could help them from an efficiency perspective or reducing downtime, mechanical problems and issues like that. So, I think it's the approach, and how do we as an IoT community better identify these under-resourced, underserved industries or sub-industries, because there's probably a lot of money on the table that the industry is missing, because the eye on the prize is always these large multinational corporations, these large nationwide companies. And if you hone in on the state of Texas, there could be quite a bit of money for oil and gas suppliers, distributors, field service companies that need some type of, whether it's plug and play or something that's implemented very easily, because that's also something I think that they're more likely to leverage or use in their business to help them with their customers.
Yeah, and I think the IoT opportunity is not just in service and operations, but like I was mentioning before, I mean, their primary asset is the actual asset, or what they call, what we think of as the reservoir, right? So if they identify a field, that's what they would like to characterize with IoT. And they've been using IoT technologies for quite some time. And earlier I was talking about how they really kind of lead the edge on IoT, and have for a long time, even outside of industrial, simply because a lot of their assets are out in remote rural areas, like what you were saying. Stephanie, you live right smack dab in the middle of all that stuff, so you know very well. Or they could be out on a rig in the middle of the Gulf or offshore. And these are very constrained environments. I mean, if you want to talk about requirements that are extremely stringent, just go and look at what the oil and gas industry is dealing with on a day-to-day basis. But here's the funny thing: as you guys were talking, it dawned on me that this industry is one of the industry where this whole idea, or this axiom that what is it? Data is the
new oil.
Oil literally is. It's actually true. Right? You follow the oil, and if you cut off the oil, there's no value, right? Or value is lost, and that is why data is important along that pipeline at actually the most important interface, which is the well, right? And speaking of parts, I mean, I was working with some majors back in my IBM days on IoT and emerging technologies, and figuring out, well, how do we design or think through what the well of the future is going to be. They were talking about instrumenting drill bits, because these things, number one, are really costly, and if they fail, they disrupt production directly. I mean, this is where the money is, right? You work your way out, and the ROI, the value, starts to diminish as you move away from the well. And that, I think, when you look at the oil and gas industry, that's a really simple way of looking at where is the value in IoT. But you also have to consider that these guys probably know more about IoT than any of us do. Because they're looking at technologies like they've been looking at edge computing for a long time. How do you put HPC out on a rig and in a way where it doesn't explode? Or how do you get AR glasses on our well operators on a rig in the middle of the Gulf, which won't ignite an explosion on the rig and destroy the entire operating asset? So but I think it is going to be challenging for IoT folks to actually identify truly underserved segments of the oil and gas industry. I think the approach, as you start to get further out from the well, this is my opinion, and I'd like to get your reactions. You really have to work with either the OEM or the service provider, or the field service organization, or the customer has to assume the risk and the cost of instrumenting assets to reduce production risk or risk to production. My thinking is that's how you have to kind of think through it, and then once you do that, you realize, okay, it would be a challenging conversation to have.
I don't like Mark, I don't completely disagree, but I have a different view that it's not just at the well. I think when Stephanie mentioned downstream, midstream, upstream, the reality is it's a chain, right? It's like if we got a blockage at the Suez Canal, like we're done, right? But that was just a part in a big process. So I think that from an IoT perspective, there's value beyond the well. What changes though is who cares about that value, because you might have company X, I own this portion, and here's the well, right? And the money literally flowing out of the ground. But you can have hundreds or thousands of suppliers down the rest of the chain that could all leverage differently and independently from an IoT outcome. And everybody's got to be in it to win it. However, this brings some issues that we visited 30 episodes ago, which is, hey, if you have a complex supply chain where IoT could help everyone in the chain, like everyone, like across the board, but things get shut down to who owns the data and who's the customer of record? And if we get breached, who's responsible? And then it's like, never mind, you do your thing, Stephanie, do your thing, and I'll do my thing. But anyway, that's my way of disagreeing, Leonard. I think in this, there's IoT value, soup to nuts.
Beautiful. And then you just stepped on the biggest pile of data doo-doo in the industry, which is it's awesome that you did that, because the question of who owns the data is a huge one in the industry. I mean, if you think that BP or Shell own the data, they actually they contract out the operations as well as the build out of these assets. They're like project managers for the most part, and they're trying to focus on, like what Stephanie, you were talking about, the upstream stuff, but like exploration and identifying and figuring out where these assets are, and then contracting with the different jurisdictions and countries to develop these assets. So you're spot on. There's data everywhere, and even downstream. Well, downstream, then you have the refineries, right? That's
and I would say I would add a whole nother look to the layers. And outside of exploration, I think most of IoT is going to be after you start production. I think a lot of the opportunities, but I look at it from what are some of the opportunities or key factors that the industry is focused on? And they're focused, huge safety, compliance, generation, transmission. And so maybe there are a couple other factors that come into play that are super important to the industry. And there are IoT solutions that help facilitate those key issues in the industry, or help reduce cost or improve efficiency, all the typical enterprise terms that we throw out there for marketing. But I think as you get closer to the customer, you're speaking their language when you actually talk about a very specific instance, like I mentioned in Colorado, the air monitoring compliance that's required by May 1st.
Yeah.
That's a trigger. That's something that they have to comply with, or they might not, that shuts down production. So I think as you get closer to more specifics, I think a lot of the industry in IoT, we speak in such generalities, and they mean a lot of things to a lot of industries. But when you start to get into the field services sector for oil and gas, if you're not talking about the issues or the solutions or the products that they're putting out there to help their customers, and IoT comes into factor in those, then you're not going to really be able to meet the underserved or under-resourced, because they're not going to have that conversation with you. And so one of the things that I like to do with my customers, especially as they're starting to, okay, let me just focus in on 3 verticals, 3 industries. A lot of people in the industry call them verticals, and then maybe they even have some sub-industries that go under that. Well, my first exercise of them is, do you understand their ecosystem? Mm-hmm. And when I say ecosystem, I mean suppliers, partners. What are these big equipment brands that they work with? What are some of the external parties that are involved in this whole flow of operations? And then what are some of their main vendors that they work with that maybe aren't even technology related? Yeah. But if you don't understand who they are and what they're doing, then you're never going to have that conversation, and you're not going to understand. And I know that a lot of people hire subject matter experts and whatnot, and that's like a few steps further. But if you don't understand you don't have a good grasp on this ecosystem that you're trying to sell to or market to, then you're really going to struggle. And they're not going to talk about IoT. They're just not going to.
Exactly. Oh my God. I think this is weird. This is probably the most screwed up, production of an episode that we've had, but it's, I think, one of the best ones that we've had for our audience, especially.
It's always the best one each week, right?
Yeah, you're right. But you know what? I actually have to take off. This is going to be the shortest episode.
I love it. Hey, I love these little.
That bad. But before we sign off, I just wanted to bring up what we started our failed recording with, which is the tremendous success that Elevate Our Kids had. There was a press release. There was a collaboration with T-Mobile. And, Stephanie, just plug that really quick. But I want to recognize you because I witnessed the tremendous work that you did, the leadership that you provided in making this happen. And, there's a lot of people who talk about doing charitable stuff and doing things for the good. I'm truly, I really mean this from the bottom of my heart, really honored to have been part of this, to support you. To support you, you led, and it was an absolute beautiful thing to see. Seriously.
Thank you so much.
And that's coming from here. Yeah.
It's extremely rewarding. I think the big thing is I feel like a lot of us go about our day-to-day jobs, but when you start to get into activities like this, it's just, it's rewarding, it's exciting, and we're helping. We always talk about tech for good, and the whole idea around Elevate Our Kids was, okay, we got to start doing something about it. Yeah. What can we do? And for this particular instance, we are supporting Tulsa, Oklahoma schools with 150 Chromebooks and internet access. And we targeted them because they're an under-resourced and they don't underfunded. And we looked for diverse neighborhoods, and we're like, these folks, it's not fair that COVID happened. It's not fair that the pandemic happened. We're forcing kids to remotely learn in homes and areas and neighborhoods that don't have access and don't have equipment. That's a shame. So Elevate Our Kids was all about that. And so we hope to do more. Corporations, if you want to get involved, let us know. ElevateOurKids.org. Yeah, call us.
Yeah, big time. So with that, thanks for listening in. Follow us at www.iotcoffeetalk.com. Punch that like button. And rise and shine. Isn't that like forgetting?
I hate that it turns it around. How do you flip it? Oh, there is a way to flip your screen.
Yeah.
I didn't do that. There is a way to flip your screen on Zoom.
I'm just wondering where your get shit done one is.
I don't know. My husband complained to me this last night when he was putting all the coffee cups. He's like, we have a coffee cup problem. We have to throw away some or give away some because he's like, we don't have any room for them. Wow. And I just bought 2 more.
You know what? You could bury them out in your gigantic yard or ranch.
I love my coffee cups.
Well, going forward, I'm going to use this IoT connected.
Yes. There you go.
Yeah.
Well, I want to say that it's the last day for nominations, but by the time this is published.
Yeah.
But we got a lot of folks come. I mean, of course, everyone, they're just like me. We're procrastinators and they're all rolling in at the last day. So I'm like, my emails are flowing right now. So,
so we'll let you.
I'm excited. Next week, we'll have a press release around to the, so I may be, don't, if I have a tie or if I need some help, I might be reaching out to you guys and getting some of your feedback on the voting.
Okay.
Right.
Sounds good. All right, guys. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
See you next week. Bye.